You got the raise. Maybe not long ago, maybe last year, maybe this year. You were earning a decent amount already, and then the number went up. You moved to a nicer place, or started going to better restaurants, or stopped thinking twice about small purchases the way you used to. Life felt like it was expanding to fit the income. And then, a few months later, you sat down and looked at your bank account, and you felt the same, maybe a little worse. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You're making more money than you ever honestly expected to be making at this point in your life. That was supposed to fix things. It didn't. The gap between what you earn and how financially secure you feel seems to hold steady, like it's calibrated to stay constant, no matter what the paycheck says. What nobody explains is why. Not you're spending too much. That's the surface-level answer that doesn't actually help anyone. The real answer is in the science. There's a documented, well-researched psychological mechanism that consumes income before it ever has a chance to compound. It's not a character flaw. It's not a discipline problem. It's a predictable cognitive pattern, and once you understand how it actually works, you stop blaming yourself and start designing around it. That's what this is about. The paradox that nobody explains. Let's start with a simple picture. Someone earns $40,000 a year, feels stretched, works hard, gets promoted, and their income doubles to $80,000. There's a genuine honeymoon period, a couple of months where things feel better, more breathing room, less anxiety when the credit card statement arrives. But then, slowly, the anxiety returns. The old apartment didn't feel right for someone earning this amount, so they moved somewhere nicer. The car started to feel incongruent with the new social context, so they upgraded. Dinners out became more frequent because that's the natural behavior in the new income bracket. The social circle shifted. Same people, different activities, all of which cost more. And 18 months after the raise, this person has arrived back at the same feeling of barely keeping up they had at $40,000. The money math says this should be impossible. You doubled the income. The anxiety should have halved, at minimum, but it didn't. This is not a story about bad decisions. Every individual choice in that sequence was defensible. The nicer apartment? Reasonable. The car upgrade? Not extravagant. The dinners out? Just social participation. There's no obvious point where the person made a mistake. The system produced the outcome, not individual failures, but a pattern. A predictable, documented pattern that economists and psychologists have been studying for decades. And here's why this matters. The standard advice for this situation is spend less, track your expenses, cut the subscriptions, budget more strictly. But that advice is built for people who are making bad choices. What we're describing here is a situation where every choice feels entirely rational. You can't fix a system problem with a willpower solution. This episode is going to give you the mechanism, not blame the mechanism. Because once you see it clearly, you can work with it instead of fighting against it. So let's start with the first piece of that mechanism, the one that activates the moment a raise hits your account, a new possession arrives, or a lifestyle upgrade is made. The Diderot Effect. One upgrade triggers a cascade. 1769, French philosopher Denis Diderot received a beautiful new dressing gown as a gift. He loved it. It was well made, elegant, probably the nicest single thing he owned. And almost immediately after receiving it, he started noticing that everything else in his study looked shabby by comparison. The rug looked worn. The desk looked cheap. The chair was wrong. The bookshelves weren't right. Over the next several months, Diderot replaced nearly every object in his study, one at a time, trying to bring the rest of his environment up to the standard of the new robe. He wrote about this experience in an essay called Regret for My Old Dressing Gown, and he described it with remarkable self-awareness. I was the absolute master of my old dressing gown. he wrote, "but I have become the slave of the new one." Diderot was describing what consumer behavior researcher Grant McCracken formalized in 1988 as the Diderot Effect, the documented tendency of one new acquisition to trigger a cascade of additional acquisitions, as a person tries to maintain a coherent standard of living across all areas of their life. Here's how it plays out in practice for the 22 to 35 demographic. You get your first significant salary or a major raise. Decide, reasonably, to move somewhere that reflects your new income. The new apartment is great, but now the furniture looks wrong in it. So you upgrade the furniture. Now the car feels out of place in the building's parking area. So you lease something better. The wardrobe doesn't match the new professional context. So you update it. Your social circle, which has shifted to match the new income level, expects certain restaurants, certain travel, a certain standard of living. Each of those choices is individually reasonable. The cascade is financially devastating. Research on consumer behavior suggests this cascade typically consumes 80% or more of an income increase within 18 months. Not through a single large purchase, through a dozen small, defensible upgrades that collectively redirect the entire raise before any of it can compound into something lasting. This is important to understand because the Diderot effect is almost invisible while it's operating. You're not making bad choices. You're making sensible adjustments to a new context. The robe is always just a robe. The apartment is just a nicer apartment. It's only when you zoom out and look at the full pattern that the mechanism becomes visible. But the Diderot cascade is still only the first layer of what's happening. Hedonic adaptation, why more never feels like more. In 1978, researchers Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff-Bullman published a study that became one of the most cited papers in all of psychology. They looked at two groups, lottery winners who had received between $50,000 and $1 million, and people who had been in serious accidents and become paraplegic. Then they measured well-being. 1 year after each group's life-changing event, the lottery winners were not measurably happier than a control group who had won nothing. The accident victims, despite their significant challenges, had returned to roughly the same baseline satisfaction they had reported before the accident. The brain in both cases had found its way back to center. This is hedonic adaptation. It's the brain's built-in mechanism for returning to a stable emotional baseline regardless of what happens. Positive or negative, and it's not a malfunction. It's a feature. Early humans who became overwhelmed with joy every time they found food couldn't focus on the next hunt. Constant strong emotion is cognitively costly. The brain adapted to dampen both highs and lows, so that attention could return to the practical business of staying alive. In a modern consumer economy, this same mechanism produces a specific and entirely predictable problem. Everything you acquire, achieve, or improve stops feeling good much faster than you expect. The new apartment feels amazing for about 3 weeks. Then it's just where you live. The raise creates genuine relief for a month or two. Then it's just your salary, the new normal, the new baseline. The vacation high fades within days of getting home. Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton's 2010 Princeton study found that above roughly $75,000 a year, additional earnings showed dramatically diminishing returns to day-to-day emotional well-being. A 2021 follow-up study by Matthew Killingsworth at Penn showed the relationship continues at higher incomes but flattens significantly. More income lifts the floor of your experience. You suffer less from acute financial stress, but it doesn't raise the ceiling. And the improvements you do feel are temporary because adaptation reclaims them. This is why the phrase hedonic treadmill fits so well. You're walking fast. The scenery changes, but you're not actually moving forward in terms of sustained well-being. You just need to walk faster to stay in place. And here's the thing about hedonic adaptation. It doesn't run alone. The moving goalposts of social comparison Leon Festinger proposed social comparison theory in 1954. The core argument: humans don't evaluate themselves against objective standards. We evaluate ourselves against other people, specifically against people who are nearby in status, situation, or income. The question, "Am I doing well financially?" is almost never answered in absolute terms. It's answered relative to whoever you happen to be comparing yourself to at this point in your life. This was adaptive for most of human history when your reference group was a small, stable tribe. The comparison set didn't change. Today, it changes every time your income or social context shifts. Here's the mechanism in practice. You're earning $60,000, and most of your friends and colleagues are earning $40,000 to $50,000. In that context, you feel reasonably comfortable. You're doing well relative to your comparison set. Then you get a significant raise. Your professional context shifts, and you start spending time with people earning $120,000 or $150,000. Suddenly $60,000 or even $100,000 feels inadequate, not because the number is objectively insufficient, because your comparison set changed. Harvard economist Urzo Lutmer studied this and found something striking. When a neighbor's income increases, a person's own self-reported happiness decreases, even when that person's own income hasn't changed at all. The perception of relative standing matters as much as actual income level. This is the moving goalpost dynamic in action. New income leads to new social context. New social context creates a new comparison set. New comparison set produces new financial inadequacy, regardless of the absolute number. Then the raise hits again, and the cycle repeats at a higher level. It's not weakness. It's not materialism. It's the primate brain running the software it was built to run. But in a world where income grows and social context keeps shifting, that software works directly against long-term financial well-being. And underneath all of these psychological mechanisms, the Diderot cascade, the hedonic treadmill, the comparison reset, there's a financial reality that almost never gets discussed explicitly. The hidden tax on a bigger life. There's a version of lifestyle inflation that everyone knows about. The expensive meals, the designer items, the obvious splurges. That's not what this chapter is about. This is about the costs nobody tells you are coming when your income grows. The structural expenses that arrive automatically before you've made a single discretionary choice. Call it the hidden tax on a bigger life. Let's make this concrete. You receive a $30,000 raise. Before taxes, that sounds significant. After federal and state taxes, depending on your bracket, you're taking home roughly $1,500 extra per month. That's the starting point. Now, here's where it actually goes. Moving to a nicer neighborhood, which feels appropriate and reasonable at the new income level, adds $500 to $700 per month in rent or mortgage. Transportation in that new context, or maintaining a car that fits the area, adds another $100 to $150. Professional expectations at a higher level, wardrobe, appearance, upkeep, add another $100 or more per month. Your social circle at this income level eats at different restaurants, travels to different places, gives gifts at a different price point. Just participating in that social context, at a minimum, adds another $200 to $300 a month. Add it up. Roughly $1,100 to $1,200 per month in structural costs, just to maintain the baseline expectation of the new income level. On a $1,500 monthly take-home increase, you've consumed the majority of the raise before any discretionary spending has even begun. No lattes, no impulse buys, no single moment of irresponsibility. The hidden tax just consumed your raise. This is why so many people in their early 30s have thin savings despite genuinely strong incomes. The income goes up. The structural cost of the lifestyle goes up to match. The gap stays thin. But the moment you understand that absolute income is not the variable that determines financial security, The frame shifts completely. The savings rate is the only number that matters. Here is a fact that sounds wrong the first time you hear it. Your income level is a relatively weak predictor of your long-term financial health. Savings rate, the percentage of your income that you consistently save and invest, is the primary driver. Let's look at the math directly, because the math is the most persuasive argument here. At a 7% annual return, the historical inflation-adjusted average of a broad stock market index, $15,000 invested per year for 30 years grows to approximately $1.47 million. $7,500 per year for 30 years grows to approximately $735,000. Now, here's the scenario that makes this real. Person A earns $150,000 per year and saves 5%. That's $7,500 annually. Person B earns $50,000 per year and saves 30%, $15,000 annually. Same time horizon, same market conditions. After 30 years, Person B has approximately twice the invested wealth of Person A. Person A earns 3 times as much. Person B has twice the net worth. This is compound interest, not a trick. The savings rate, the percentage protected, is what compounds. The absolute income determines the ceiling, but the savings rate determines how much of that ceiling actually gets captured. And this reframes the entire conversations about raises and income growth. A raise isn't the victory. It's the opportunity. The question isn't, how much more am I earning? The question is, how much of that increase can I protect from the Diderot cascade, from hedonic adaptation, from the comparison reset? Protect the savings rate, and wealth builds regardless of the absolute income level. Let the savings rate collapse under lifestyle expansion, and no income level is ever sufficient. The obvious question now is how to protect it. And the conventional answer turns out to be exactly the wrong tool for this situation. Why traditional budgeting fails high earners. The standard personal finance advice for someone who isn't saving enough is make a budget. Track every purchase. Categorize the spending. Identify the areas that are too high and cut them back. This advice works for some people. It fails predictably and consistently for people with above-average incomes and demanding professional lives, not because they're bad at math, not because they lack discipline, because of cognitive resource depletion. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely spent years studying how people actually make financial decisions under real conditions. One consistent finding: decision-making is a finite resource. Each choice, whether to buy something, whether to resist a purchase, whether a cost fits the budget, depletes cognitive energy. Small financial decisions, made repeatedly throughout the day, draw from the same limited pool as every other kind of decision. A high earner in a senior professional role is making complex decisions all day. Strategy, people, priorities, trade-offs. By evening, the cognitive bandwidth required to execute a detailed restrictive budget is essentially gone. Not as an excuse, as a physiological reality. The tank is empty. There's also a psychological resistance that activates at higher income levels. It sounds something like this. I earn good money. I shouldn't have to track whether I spent $14 or $20 on lunch. That feeling isn't vanity. It's a signal that a restriction-based system doesn't fit the reality of someone's life. When the system feels punitive or degrading, it gets abandoned. And most conventional budget systems are restriction-based. The alternative that actually works is not more tracking. It's fewer decisions, specifically. Removing the savings decision from the equation entirely by automating it before spending begins. Ramit Sethi describes this as a conscious spending plan. Automate savings and investments to move the moment the salary hits the account, before any spending decision is made, and then spend freely on whatever's left. No tracking. No willpower. No guilt. The savings happen before the spending decision exists. But before this system can work effectively, there's a question most people in this demographic have never actually sat down to answer. The enough question nobody asks. Here's the question: what does enough look like for you? Not more than I have now. Not a vague sense of comfortable, a specific written down definition. What does a genuinely good month of your life actually cost? In real dollars, including everything you actually value. Most people in this demographic have never answered that question. And in the absence of an answer, the goalposts move automatically, pulled by the Diderot cascade, reset by hedonic adaptation, and continuously recalibrated by whoever you're comparing yourself to today. Without a personal definition of enough, your financial target is always wherever the people slightly above you in the comparison set happen to be. Seneca wrote something about this almost 2,000 years ago that is nearly impossible to improve on. It is not the man who has little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more. The insight isn't about living on little. It's about definition. Knowing what you're actually trying to reach. The FIRE community, financial independence, retire early, popularized the concept of a personal FI number, the amount of invested assets needed to generate enough passive income to cover your lifestyle indefinitely. Knowing that number transforms every financial decision from vague to legible. Does this purchase move me toward the number or away from it? You don't need to pursue early retirement to benefit from that clarity. The act of having a number changes the quality of every spending decision you make. Here's the practical version. Sit down, tonight, not eventually, and write out what a genuinely good month of your life costs. Housing, food, transportation, entertainment, travel, health, savings, everything you actually value. Add it up. Write the number. That number is your lifestyle ceiling. Not a budget you track obsessively, but a definition you've chosen for yourself, so that the goalposts have somewhere to stop instead of moving forever. Setting that ceiling is one of the most financially significant choices available to anyone in this demographic. It gives the Diderot cascade a place to stop. It tells the comparison mechanism what you're actually optimizing for, instead of letting it default to more than whoever's next in the reference group. And it transforms the automation step from a vague intention into something mechanical and executable. Once the number is defined, the system runs itself. Automate the good decision. In 1998, behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi ran a program called Save More Tomorrow at a manufacturing company in the United States. The premise was elegant. Instead of asking employees to reduce their current take-home pay to save more, which triggers immediate loss aversion and requires ongoing willpower, the program asked employees to commit in advance to directing a portion of their future raises toward retirement savings before those raises arrived. The results were striking. Over 40 months, average savings rates at that company increased from 3.5% to 13.6%. Nobody's take-home pay was reduced. No budget tracking was required. No willpower was tested. The only structural change was that future raises were captured before the employees had any chance to adapt to spending them. This is the mechanism. Money captured before your spending decisions start is money hedonic adaptation cannot claim. The adaptation process works on what's available. If a percentage moves to savings before any spending decision is made, the brain adapts to the remainder as if that were the full income. The savings are invisible, in the most useful possible sense. The practical prescription is straightforward. Set up an automatic transfer to an investment account to execute on the same day your salary arrives. Not at the end of the month when willpower is depleted and the account is often already thin anyway. The moment the money hits the account, a fixed percentage moves to savings. 20% of take-home is the target to aim for. 10% is a valid starting point if 20 isn't feasible right now. And then apply that same principle to every future raise. Commit to routing a meaningful portion of each increase directly to savings before the lifestyle has time to adapt to spending it. The Diderot cascade can only consume what it has access to. Hedonic adaptation can only reclaim what the brain can spend. Capture the savings first, and both mechanisms stop working against you. You genuinely cannot miss money you never saw. But the full weight of this only becomes visible over time. The wealth gap in practice. The effects of lifestyle inflation are nearly invisible in year 1. They're only slightly visible in year 5. By year 30, they're the difference between genuine financial freedom and the same monthly anxiety at a much higher income level. Let's look at two people. Same career, same industry, same starting salary, same 3% annual raises over their careers, same 7% investment return throughout. Person A earns $80,000 a year. Each time the income grows, the lifestyle expands to meet it. Nicer apartment, better car, higher social spending. They save 5%, $4,000 a year to start. The savings rate stays at 5% as the income grows over the decades. Person B also earns $80,000. Each time the income grows, they route the majority of the increase directly into investments, holding the lifestyle roughly flat. They maintain a 20% savings rate, $16,000 a year to start, growing as income grows. After 30 years at the same market return, the same career trajectory, and the same salary growth, Person A has approximately $490,000 invested. Person B has approximately $1.97 million. Same career, same income, same market. $1.48 million separating them. Not because of luck, not because of superior earnings, not because of extraordinary investment skill. Because of a savings rate difference, $4,000 a year versus $16,000 a year, maintained consistently over 30 years. This is the wealth gap nobody sees accumulating. Person A made reasonable, defensible choices every step of the way. No individual decision was obviously wrong. The cascade was running. The adaptation was running. The comparison reset was running. The compound effect of those reasonable, individually defensible decisions across 3 decades is the gap. Person B didn't deprive themselves. They automated a different choice, held the lifestyle ceiling deliberately, and let compound interest do the work. The gap isn't a product of sacrifice. It's a product of a different system. And one of the most powerful levers in that system isn't your savings account. It's your social environment. Redesigning your reference group. Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler documented something in their 2009 book, Connected, that initially sounds almost implausible. Your financial behaviors are measurably influenced by people 3 degrees of social separation from you, not just close friends. Your friends' friends' friends. The spending norms, the financial attitudes, the consumption standards of people you have never directly met are shaping your sense of what's normal. This is because social comparison doesn't run on direct contact. It runs on perceived norms, on what feels like the standard for people at your life stage, income level, and social context. And those perceived norms are formed by everything you're regularly exposed to. Your immediate social circle, your professional environment, the content you consume, the social feeds you scroll through each day. The implication is both significant and actionable. If you can change what you're consistently exposed to, you change the baseline. And that is a legitimate, documented strategy, not a vague motivational suggestion. Here's what it looks like in practice. First, do a quick audit of the content you consume. If your social media is dominated by people displaying expensive lifestyles, travel, brands, experiences that signal a certain income level, your brain is using that content to calibrate what's normal. Every day. Silently. The algorithm is not neutral. It's continuously refining your sense of what people at your stage are supposed to have. That calibration is working directly against your savings rate. Second, actively expose yourself to content from people who have achieved what you actually want. Not displayed the most, but accumulated the most. The FIRE community is full of people with high net worths who live modestly by deliberate choice. Stoic philosophy offers frameworks for genuine satisfaction within what you already have. Spending even 30 minutes a week with that kind of input instead of high-consumption content doesn't just shift your mindset abstractly. It recalibrates the social comparison baseline in a concrete, measurable direction. You don't have to abandon your social circle or become a different person. You just have to be deliberate about what you let set your sense of normal. The comparison mechanism runs regardless of whether you're managing it. You might as well point it somewhere that actually works for you, which brings everything together into the system you can start tonight. A system for the next 6 months. Everything in this episode has been pointing toward the same conclusion. The psychological mechanisms producing lifestyle inflation are not character flaws. They're cognitive features: hedonic adaptation, social comparison, the Diderot cascade, running exactly as designed in an environment that wasn't built for your long-term financial benefit. You can't fight them with willpower. You can design around them. And the design is actually straightforward. 3 steps. Tonight, not eventually. Step 1. Define your enough number. Sit down and write out what a genuinely good month of your life actually costs. Not the aspirational version, the real one. Housing, food, transportation, entertainment, health, travel, everything you actually value. Add it up. Write the number down. This is your lifestyle ceiling. Not a budget you're tracking obsessively. A definition you've chosen for yourself so that the goalposts have somewhere to stop instead of moving indefinitely forward. Step 2. Automate your savings rate. Set up an automatic transfer to an investment account to execute on the day your salary arrives. 20% of take-home is the target. 10% if 20 isn't feasible right now. The transfer moves before you pay any bill, before any spending decision is made. The brain adapts to what's available, so make sure what's available is the amount left after saving, not the full paycheck. And when the next raise comes, route the majority of it directly to savings before the lifestyle has time to adapt. Step 3. Audit one comparison input. Just one. Find one source of content, one account you follow, one feed you check that consistently makes you feel financially behind or inadequate. Either stop consuming it or replace it with something that makes you feel smart about the choices you're making. One swap. The comparison mechanism runs regardless. You might as well point it at something useful. Psychologist Peter Gollwitzer showed in 1999 that people who specify the exact when, where, and how of a planned action are 2 to 3 times more likely to follow through than people with a general intention. I want to save more fails almost universally. I will set up a $1,500 automatic transfer to my investment account on the 1st of next month before paying any bill succeeds at a dramatically higher rate. The implementation intention is the commitment, not the motivation, not the discipline, not the willpower. The system is what does the work. Here's the full picture of what this episode covered. Chapter 1, named The Central Paradox. Doubling the income and arriving at the same financial anxiety. Not because of bad decisions, but because of a predictable, documented pattern that operates below the level of any individual choice. Chapter 2 introduced the Diderot Effect. One new acquisition triggers a cascade of upgrades, each individually rational. The combined pattern consuming the majority of an income increase before any of it can compound into lasting wealth. Chapter 3 explained hedonic adaptation, the brain's mechanism for returning to a stable baseline, which makes every new income level feel temporary, every upgrade feel normal within weeks, and every raise feel insufficient within months. Chapter 4 showed how social comparison raises the goalposts automatically. New income shifts the social context. New social context resets the comparison set. New comparison set produces new financial inadequacy at every income level, indefinitely. Chapter 5 quantified the hidden tax on a bigger life, the structural costs that consume the majority of a raise before any discretionary spending begins, quietly, and without a single irresponsible decision. Chapter 6 made the core reframe. Absolute income is a weak predictor of wealth. Savings rate is the primary driver. The math is unambiguous, and it changes everything. Chapter 7 explained why traditional budgeting fails high earners. Cognitive depletion, psychological resistance, and a restriction-based system applied to people for whom restriction is not actually the problem. Chapter 8 asked the question that resets the entire picture. What does enough actually look like for you in real dollars? Without a personal definition, the goalposts move automatically forever. Setting the ceiling is the intervention. Chapter 9 gave the behavioral architecture solution. Automate savings before any spending decision is made. The Save More Tomorrow program demonstrated that savings captured before adaptation can claim them become permanent. The system does the work that willpower can't sustain. Chapter 10 showed the wealth gap in practice. The same career, the same salary, 30 years, a gap of $1.48 million. Compounded choices, not extraordinary circumstances or superior income. Chapter 11 showed that redesigning your reference group, deliberately changing what sets your sense of normal, is a documented and effective financial strategy, not a vague mindset exercise. And Chapter 12 gave you the 3-step system. Define your enough number tonight. Automate your savings immediately. Swap one comparison input. The income you have right now is already enough to build something significant, if the mechanisms that quietly consume it are understood and designed around. The system is the commitment. Start there. If this shifted something in how you think about money, pass it along to someone who just got a raise and is already feeling the pull of that first upgrade. The best time to understand this is before the cycle fully takes hold.